but specifically in the context of narratives. Why narratives? Why choose narratives to measure comprehension regardless of what's explicitly happening in the classroom?
Part of the problem that you see in the current approaches to measuring comprehension is that the measurement is focused on pretty simple language. If you look at the way that it's currently done, besides counting the number of words someone tells back to you, you have very, very simple open-ended questions or true-false questions that children have to answer, or you have a maze task, but those very often don't get at how well someone understands complex language. And that is what children struggle with. Most of the children, of course, in the world have typical language learning ability, and they do not struggle at any considerable degree with having a conversation with their peers or communicating in a contextualized format. But the difficulty comes when you place something that is written or oral, it doesn't matter, in this complex register. And that's where they have difficulty. And the beautiful thing about narrative discourse is that usually when we tell a story, it forces us to create the context with our words because someone wasn't there. It's decontextualized. And so you have to use complex language, not for the sake of wanting to sound complex, but for the sake of clarity. You have to use complex language. And so narratives, and of course, expository as well. Both of those discourse types, they absolutely force you to talk more like a book, more like written complex language. And so Story Champs and the Cube, they don't exclusively focus on narrative language. There are elements of exposition in as well, but the purpose behind all of that is that we want to measure that particular construct, academic or, quote unquote, academic language or more complex language that you see in the schools.
That was fun to hear your answer of that, Doug. Like, I'm going to probably say the same things, but I'm going to use a whole different set of words. Okay, so I want to answer that question is in talking about like what a narrative is, right? A narrative is a telling or retelling of causally and temporally related events. And this is defined differently than exposition, which is like a collection of facts. Okay, now, those are not like precise definitions, but they're good enough for the point I'm trying to make. Comprehension comes about because of relations between events. Narratives by nature, by default, they are causally and temporally related events or components. Whereas exposition, you could have a paragraph that is loosely related, right? But that you have relations using like transition words like however or although, right? So there are different devices to create connections between the facts, right? But our brains are primed to learn connections and relations between things, not lists of things. So I think the number is 22 times better. People can learn something 22 times better in the context of a story than they can in a list of facts, okay? And so the story is very powerful, and it comes from the being human, the way our brains have developed. And because of these causal relations, that our brains are primed to be able to understand it. So it makes narrative a very, very good tool for measuring comprehension, because can the child or the individual glean what's important from these relationships between these events, right? Okay, the other beautiful thing about a narrative, and even expository, or I guess I would say at a discourse level, there are multiple layers of patterns or of academic language dimensions. So at the smallest level, there are words or word parts like in the morphological awareness sense, we can break words apart. There's meaning in those pieces. But words contain the morphological elements, sentences contain the words and the morphological elements, and the discourse, which is the higher level macro organization of the narrative or exposition, it contains the sentences and the words and the word parts. And so when we go all the way up to the narrative level, we are actually capturing comprehension or the ability to understand and produce all the other levels of the patterns of oral academic language, or not all academic language, doesn't have to be oral. So there's a beauty in going at this narrative level, because now you get the integration. And I just want to make note about Scarborough's reading rope. The upper strands of Scarborough's rope, okay, one is background knowledge. I'm just going to set that one aside for a minute, okay? But the rest of them are vocabulary, language structure, literacy knowledge. That is exactly the word, sentence, and discourse level patterns that we need for language comprehension. The other one is verbal reasoning, which is about the inferencing, and inferencing requires that our brain put these pieces together. Like, how are the words connected to other words? And how is this sentence connected to the other sentence? And how is this discourse related to my own experiences of background knowledge? And so it's all within those relations within a single narrative, all right? And narratives are more powerful and easier than exposition, but it doesn't mean exposition shouldn't also be used in our assessment. In fact, we have some data to suggest that we should be looking at the language that they can understand and produce in exposition. But most of the work has been done in narratives because it's more appropriate for our younger developing brains. And we would start there by building on a mechanism that our brains are already hardwired to be able to do and to learn and to express what they know through a narrative.